Now that we have our gray model crate, let's paint it by applying a PBR Material Texture Set. A complete set for Trainz has 7 texture maps. Albedo, also known as diffuse or base color, normal, displacement, emission, roughness, ambient occlusion, and metallic. However, I'm only going to use 3 maps: albedo, normal, and roughness. We not only want to add color to our crate, but since it's going to be made of wood, we want to add wood grain. And we want to show that it has a dull surface. For many models, these 3 maps are often sufficient. It also helps to simplify texturing when you are new to the process. For texturing, I have chosen Brown Planks 03 from Polyhaven. On the internet, open Polyhaven. Locate the Brown Planks 03 PBR Material Texture Set and download. Unzip the file. If you like, you can open the Blender file that comes with the texture set to view the texture. In the 3D Edit window, scroll to the right and select Material View Mode to view the texturing. From Polyhaven, only one set of PBR material textures is available: 4K. 4K is a little larger than we need, so we will use GIMP to reduce the size. Notice also that the diffuse and roughness files are in JPEG format, and the normal file is in EXR format. So these formats will have to be changed to PNG. Open GIMP and import the Brown Planks 03 diffuse 4K PNG file. In the Image menu, select Scale Image. Set the width and height to 1024 pixels and select Scale. In the File menu, select Export As. Change the format to PNG and export. Import the Brown Planks 03 normal 4K EXR file. Adjust the size to 1024 by 1024 pixels. In the File menu, select Export As and change the format to PNG format and export. Import the Brown Planks 03 rough 4K file. Adjust the size to 1024 by 1024 pixels. In the File menu, select Export As. Change the format to PNG and export. UV unwrapping can be thought of as an efficient way to spray paint our model. We are not going to spray paint, of course, but what if we were asked to? The most efficient way might be to lay out all the pieces side by side. Jamming all the pieces together would minimize overspray and conserve paint. Well, that's what we are going to do. We are going to disassemble our crate and lay out all the pieces as close together as possible, so we can PBR texture the outside surfaces only. That's what is called UV unwrapping. Why UV? In 3D space, the axes are called X, Y, and Z. To distinguish the axes in 2D space, they are called U and V. Faces have two surfaces, an outside and an inside. When it comes to texturing a model, the texture will only appear on the outside surface, much like a t-shirt with a logo on the outside but not on the inside. One way to tell which is the outside and which is the inside is, in edit mode, to select the overlay chevron and then check the face orientation box. The outside surfaces to which texture will be applied will be blue. The inside surfaces to which texture will not be applied will be red. Here, all the blue surfaces to be textured are orientated in the right direction. Should one or more be orientated in the wrong direction, they can be flipped with the keyboard shortcut Alt plus the N key, then select Flip. To UV unwrap the crate, we will switch from the Layout workspace to the UV Editing workspace. Let's first create a UV map. In the UV Editing workspace, select the Image menu and select New. Name the file UV Map and select OK. Save the map to your project folder by selecting the Image menu and selecting Save. In the 3D Editor workspace and in Edit mode, select the crate, keyboard shortcut the A key. Unwrap the crate using Smart UV Project. Keyboard shortcut the U key, then select Smart UV Project. Set the island margin to 0.003 and select OK. Note that one of the faces is not right. It should be square, and it is not. There are several ways to fix this. I'm going to unwrap each side of the crate separately using the Project from View option. In the 3D Editor window, switch to Front View. Keyboard shortcut the number pad 1 key. Box select the faces and unwrap by selecting the UV Mapping pop-up menu. Keyboard shortcut the U key, then selecting Project from View. Deselect the faces by left mouse button clicking off the crate. Switch to Right View. Keyboard shortcut number pad 3 key. Box select the faces and unwrap by selecting the UV Mapping pop-up menu, keyboard shortcut the U key, then select Project from View. Deselect the faces by left mouse button clicking off the crate. Switch to left view. Keyboard shortcut Control plus the number pad 3 key. Box select the faces and unwrap by selecting the UV mapping pop-up menu. Keyboard shortcut the U key, then selecting Project from View. Deselect the faces by left mouse button clicking off the crate. Switch to back view. Keyboard shortcut Control plus the number pad 1 key. Box select the faces and unwrap by selecting the UV mapping pop-up menu. Keyboard shortcut the U key, then select Project from View. Deselect the faces by left mouse button clicking off the crate. Switch to top view. Keyboard shortcut number pad 7 key. Box select the faces and unwrap by selecting the UV mapping pop-up menu. Keyboard shortcut the U key, then selecting Project from View. Deselect the faces by left mouse button clicking off the crate. In the UV Editor window, open the Properties panel, keyboard shortcut the N key, and select the UV Toolkit tab. In the 3D Editor window, select the whole crate, keyboard shortcut the A key. Then in the UV Editor window, box select the islands. In the Properties panel, select Pack UVs. Note that the horizontal islands need to be rotated 90 degrees so that the wood grain will run the length of the boards. In the UV Editor window, select the UV Sync selection icon. Select the horizontal islands and rotate 90 degrees by selecting the 90 degree icon in the Properties panel. Now in the UV Editor window, box select all of the islands, and in the Properties panel, select Pack UVs again. Save the UV map to your project folder by selecting Image menu and selecting Save. This would be a good time to save your work. Select the File menu, then Save As. Hover the mouse cursor over the 3D Editor window and change Crate05.blend to Crate06.blend by selecting the keyboard shortcut, the number pad plus key, and selecting the Save As button. My preferred program for PBR painting is the Blender add-on PBR Painter. This Blender add-on is able to add PBR texture maps right within Blender. An additional advantage when you are starting out using Blender to make Trainz assets is that the use of nodes is greatly simplified. It makes texturing easy and fun. It's a 3-step process. You first create a material. Second, you create a layer and load the PBR texture maps. You can add more than one layer, which allows you to paint, add stencils and masks to simulate grunge, rust, paint scratches, and much more. Third, you bake out the 3 files, diffuse, normal, and parameters needed to create a Trainz asset. Let's start with adding a material. Switch to the PBR Painter workspace. Drag the border between the bottom of the 3D Editor window and the Asset Browser window down to increase the size of the 3D Editor workspace. In the Properties panel of the 3D Editor window workspace, select New to add a new material. Name the material Wood. To complete the addition of the material, in the Properties window on the right, select Set up Material for PBR Painter. Uncheck Backup Current Material. Uncheck Set Fake User and select OK. Next, we want to add the texture maps. Select the Add Layer icon. Name the new layer Wood. Under Filled Painted, make sure Filled is selected and select OK. Select the Import Multiple Textures icon. Locate and load the diffuse, normal, and roughness maps for the Brown Planks 03 PBR Material Texture Set. Select the red Refresh Material to see your textures on the crate. There are several controls that we can now use to adjust the material on the mesh. I think the boards are too large, so let's reduce their width. Scroll down and open the Texture Mapping tab. Set the X and Y scale to 2. Notice that some of the boards on the sides of the crate are vertically aligned. Let's adjust them to be horizontal. Switch back to the UV Editing workspace. With the UV Sync selection still selected, in Face Selection mode, and in the 3D Editor window, select the vertical boards. With the mouse cursor hovered over the UV Editor window, rotate the face 90 degrees. Keyboard shortcut the R key, then enter 90. Notice also that some of the boards are not lined up with the faces in the UV map. That is, they are showing the cracks between the boards in the middles of the faces. We can adjust this by selecting the boards in the 3D Editor window and moving them on the X-axis in the UV Editor window. Keyboard shortcut the G key, then the X key, and dragging. This would be a good time to save your work. Select the File menu, then Save As. Hover the mouse cursor over the 3D Editor window and change Crate06.blend to Crate07.blend by selecting the keyboard shortcut the numberpad plus key and then selecting the Save As button. Now let's add a stencil to our crate that says Fragile, assuming that the crate contains something fragile. Switch back to the PBR Painter workspace. Scroll upwards and select the Add Layer icon to add a new layer. Name the layer Stencil. Under Filled Painted, select Painted. Select 1K for the size and select OK. Select the red Refresh Material. A stencil is a black and white image that you download from the internet or you create. The fragile stencil can be easily created in GIMP. Open GIMP and add a new image. File menu and select New. Make the image 1024 by 1024 pixels. Select the Text tool and add the word Fragile. You can select the text and change the fonts to, say, Times Bold. And the size to 96. You can center your text while it is still selected by holding down the Alt key and dragging. Save your file by selecting the File menu, then Export As, and name it Fragile. Select JPEG as the format. To import your stencil into Blender, in the PBR Painter workspace, select Brush Mask in the Properties window on the left. Expand the chevron and select New. Select Open and locate and load your stencil file. Under Mapping, select Stencil. Notice that when you hover your mouse cursor over the 3D Editor window, the stencil appears. Switch to Front View, keyboard shortcut number pad 1 key, and position the stencil on the cross brace. You can move the stencil using the keyboard shortcut, the Alt key, and right mouse button dragging. To scale the stencil, use Shift plus Alt and right mouse button drag. To rotate the stencil, use Control plus Alt and right mouse button drag. Select Black in the Properties window on the left. Paint in the stencil using the left mouse button. Switch to Back View, keyboard shortcut Control plus the number pad 1 key, and position and paint the stencil on the cross brace. This would be a good time to save your work. Select the File menu, then Save As. Hover the mouse cursor over the 3D Editor window and change Crate07.blend to Crate08.blend by selecting the keyboard shortcut, the number pad plus key, and then selecting the Save As button. Now let's bake out the 3 textures: diffuse, normal, and parameters. For this model, we are not actually going to bake a parameter file, which would contain emission, roughness, ambient occlusion, and metallic maps. Instead, we are going to bake out just the roughness map, as this simplifies the baking process. The model does not give off light. That is, it has no emission. It is not metallic, and the ambient occlusion adds little to the appearance. Note that the PBR Material Texture Set does come with an ambient occlusion map, and it can be included. But I'm choosing not to include it here. To bake, in the Properties window on the right, select the Bake button. Set the resolution to 1K and the margin to 0 pixels. Select the folder icon and select a location where you want to save the baked files. Set the format to PNG and select Create Exportable Material. Now select Bake and OK. Locate the files where you saved them. Notice that the file names end in 1K. To be recognized by Trainz, the files need specific endings: albedo or diffuse, normal, roughness or parameter or parameters. Although my parameters file only contains the roughness information, I'm simply going to use diffuse, parameters, and normal. It is also advisable to stick to lowercase. Now we need to link the files with their new names to the mesh. This is done in the Shader workspace, where we will find a number of nodes that were created when we baked the exportable material. In the 3D Editor Window's Properties panel, select the wood exportable material. Switch to the Shader workspace. To be able to zoom in on the nodes, you can box select the nodes and move them. Keyboard shortcut the G key followed by the Y key and drag. The node tree seen here is made up of 6 nodes that funnel information from left to right. The 3 orange nodes on the left are image texture nodes, where we will input the information from the 3 texture files we created by baking and renamed diffuse, parameters, and normal. The normal input also needs an additional node, the normal map node, to process the normal information. All of the information is fed into the principal BSDF shader node through connections that are called noodles. The principal BSDF shader node has only one output that feeds information into the surface input of the material output node. All we need to do in the shader workspace is replace the original texture files with the newly baked and renamed texture files. In the top image texture node, select the X to delete the existing base color texture file. Select Open, locate and load the baked and renamed diffuse texture file. In the middle image texture node, select the X to delete the existing roughness texture file. Select Open, locate and load the baked and renamed roughness texture file. In the bottom image texture node, select the X to delete the existing normal texture file. Select Open, locate and load the newly baked and renamed normal texture file. Since the parameters file and the normal file contain black and white information, we need to change the color space in each of these image texture nodes to non-color. To enhance the roughness of the crate boards, we can increase the strength in the normal map node to 2.5. This would be a good time to save your work. Select the File menu, then Save As. Hover the mouse cursor over the 3D Editor window and change Crate08.blend to Crate09.blend. By selecting the keyboard shortcut, the number pad plus key, and selecting the Save As button. With the textures now linked to the model, we can create the FBX file that will contain the modeling information needed by Trainz to determine the appearance and behavior of the model in the game. But first we need to change the name of the material to be Trainz compatible. The usual suffix used is m.PBR metal. Switch to the PBR Painter workspace and change the material name from Wood Exportable to wood.m.PBR metal. Switch to the Layout workspace. In Object Mode, select the model. Then select the File menu, Export, and FBX. In the pop-up window, check Selected Objects. Under Object Types, select Mesh. Under Apply Scaling, select FBX All. Under Forward, select Y Forward. Under Up, select Z Up. This configuration can be stored as part of a preset by selecting the plus icon next to the operator presets and give the set a name. To create the FBX file, select Export FBX. I've stored the FBX file with the 3 texture files associated with it, the diffuse, roughness, and normal files. We are done with Blender, so you can close the Blender file. Having saved it before exporting the FBX file, we do not need to save it again.